Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another conversation part of our March series. Happy good morning, happy good afternoon, happy good evening, or happy whatever moment of this beautiful day you are enjoying on your time zones. Happy Friday or happy very early Saturday in case you are watching us from the time zone future. And it is such a joy to have this conversation on Happy International Women's Day. So, a wholehearted Happy International Women's Day going out there for everybody in the audience, and also to all the men supporting women every single day and cheering them on and enabling them to work their magic. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co host for the next hour. We have Jessa, as usual, working her magic backstage. And we have an amazing lineup of speakers that I will ask Jessa to bring on stage. We will be talking about strategic stress management, and we will also look into techniques to maintain focus and energy in demanding roles. Quite a heavy topic for a Friday, but I think it's exactly what we need to send us off into the weekend. It's always so great to see your faces on the screen. You do bring sunshine on quite a chilly day here in Switzerland. So happy to see all of you. Now you know the drill. What I will do, I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen clockwise, and I will ask you to firstly, kindly introduce yourselves, and second, what is your definition of stress that you bring into the outline of our conversation today? Now, I will give you a few seconds to think about the second part of the question, but I will just continue to welcome people in the audience and just encourage them to generously use the chat. Keep telling us where you're listening from and help us travel vicariously around the world. And also, do drop your own definition of stress in the comments and help us keep this community growing and learning from each other. So, with no further blabathon for me, Sajal, it's so wonderful to see you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Sejal Javed, and I'm the Chief HR Officer at Ali Theater in Houston, Texas. What stress means to me? Usually, when we think of stress, we say, you know what, it's what the stress we take internally, like mentally. That's what we think. We really don't think about how stress affects us physically and emotionally. So I think those are the things that matter to me when I think about stress, is how it manifests itself when we are in positions and we are challenging times and we take on so much and we think we can take it. We can take it, but sometimes our emotions and our bodies cannot take it, and that's when things break down. So that's my definition of stress.
Thank you so very much. Andrea, good to see you and good to have you in this conversation.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I am Andrea Heron. I am the head of HR for WebMD. And I think stress for me normally means something that takes you outside of yourself. So maybe you're in fight or flight, or your nervous system is fried, whatever takes you away from your inner confidence and inner knowing, and you're starting to look outside and feeling that frantic feeling, regardless of what it is that's causing that. That to me is your stress trigger, and then how you respond to it. I know we're going to talk a lot about today, but it's really anything that takes you outside of kind of your inner knowing and inner confidence.
Thank you so very much. Sandy, welcome. Good to see you in this
Hi.
conversation.
Hi, thank you for having me and nice to see you guys as well. So I am Sunday. I am sunny California. And I've been doing HR for close to 25 years now. And stress to me, I would definitely say feeling, because everybody has already kind of touched on the other parts, right? So I'm going to just do a little bit more of what we're missing. Just the feeling of overwhelmed, of not having enough time, of just way too many tasks, and just not feeling enough to complete them.
Thank you so very much, Sandy, and making our today's panel wholesome and complete. Debbie, good to see you.
It's wonderful to see you and some familiar faces and new faces. I'm Debbie Plager. I am based in the Chicago area in the US. Not sunny, but maybe we'll get some sun eventually. And I'm the founder of the Plager Group, but before that had a 25 plus year career doing sort of organizational transformation, culture work, and executive coaching and team coach. And so trying to also be additive. I think the thing for me for stress that I'd love to bring to the conversation is we actually need stress. So like our bodies do need a certain amount of stress. And Sajal, like you were saying, like it shows up mentally, physically, emotionally, but there's a certain amount that we need, right? There's a certain amount of cortisol that we need to get our body going and to actually do our work. And so it's effective. And then I think what we're all talking about is at some point it stops being effective and the levels are too much and becomes ineffective. So what's that sweet spot between having enough stress to drive creativity, to drive our work, to drive our sense of well-being, to physically move the way we want to? And when does it become too much and we get that sense of overwhelm, that fight or flight, and that spiral down that I think we've all talked about?
Thank you all so very much. Lots of mental post-its already stored in my head. Now, before we jump to the solutions and to the techniques, I would invite all of us to just take a few minutes and really talk about how does stress show up in the workplace. And there are extra points available if we can touch on, is there any special HR flavor to stress in the workplace? I would make an educated guess that there is, but I would really, really love to hear your insights. And of course, feel free to share any experiences and any stories that you feel comfortable sharing. And what I will do, I will just leave that question there and invite you to just unmute yourselves as inspiration strikes. And otherwise, no stress, you know the drill. We start and then the unmuting competition will be officially open. So let's see. Who wants to go first? No stress? Debbie.
Right, I'll go because I hope what I take will allow people to bridge to it. How does stress show up in the workplace? So I think what we're talking about again is that overstress piece, right? So again, if we go from a brain chemistry perspective, when we have too much cortisol in our brain, we lose, right? And that usually means that, sort of our emotional brain is in charge and our thinking brain has taken the backseat. So what happens to the creativity? What happens to looking future forward in all these options? We start to get into more binary thinking, right? So if Andrea and I are having a conversation, all of a sudden stressed, I am less able to hear her. I'm less able to consider possibilities. I'm less able to make effective or creative decisions in the long run. So I think about all those ways in which it shows up in our work and then in the relationships. And both can be harmed pretty significantly when we have too much stress.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think sometimes it's hard to know, how do you differentiate between what is just work and requires that baseline level of stress you're talking about to actually motivate to get the work done? And when do you identify it as too much? And I think the answer is simply we have to do what works for us outside of work. So there's no, magic answer here. You have to step back and reflect on, where are you spending your energy? How do you feel throughout your day? Are there certain meetings you dread, particular interactions with colleagues or staff? What about that makes you feel stressed? So we have to do a little bit of that reflection to find out what are our main triggers and stressors. And then once we know what they are, you can more objectively address them, because they're unique to each person, and not just each person, but it also changes over time, because what works for you today could be a totally different stressor and situation than what you had last week. And to Debbie's point, absolutely depends on what mood you're in, what happened. Did the daycare drop-off line get backed up and now you're late? Did you get in a fight with your partner? Are you caring for your elders at home and now your boss wants what? It's like it all rolls together as part of our mental health strategy. And this is a very important piece of it. And for HR specifically, I would just add, we are the catch-all for a lot of other people's emotions. And it is very important that you find a way to center yourself and ground your own feelings so that you're not either projecting them out or absorbing other people's emotions. It took me a long time to figure that out. And so if that could be my one piece of advice to people who haven't made that leap yet, it's very important to figure out what is yours and what is not yours to protect your own stress levels.
Thank you. Sandy, I saw you unmuted there for a few seconds.
I was going to add to Debbie's point, not just the creativity, but also, if you think about it, just mistakes, right? We are more prone to make mistakes because we are feeling rushed, because we are feeling overwhelmed. And not just us, even our staff, right? It's easier for them to maybe perhaps not complete the task to the fullness. And so I think one way that is where it's big that it shows up is just productivity, mistakes, and just the overall, like, and I'll give a slide of an example, right? When somebody walks in and they're just stressed out in a really weird mood, what happens when they walk into a room? The mood just totally changes. And I think that is a big way where it actually shows. I am so sorry. My kiddo just woke up. And so I am trying to get him to mellow out.
It's wonderful. Don't worry, it's absolutely wonderful.
Just a second to get him settled, and then I'll be right back. But
take your time. We were very happy with having a guest speaker on the panel today. So take your time, no stress. We will be right here. So Sajal, would you like to take it from here?
Yes. First of all, Debbie, I love that point that you had. And then Andrea, I agree with you on that part. And I think we as HR professionals have a high level of stress. We can handle a high level of stress. And we're expected to be, if somebody is here on performance, we're expected to be here. You cannot make a mistake, you're HR, right? So that stress is always there on you. But I think the stress intensified a lot during COVID, because we were managing so many unknown things at a time. So many laws were passed, things were happening. We did not know what was going on. And on top of that, we were navigating a landscape that we did not know. We had never been in there before. We were learning as we were going, and everybody was looking to us to give them guidance and tell them what to do. And then we were like, okay, what are we doing? What are we, So it was kind of like we were learning as we were going. But I think the biggest thing that I realized during COVID was that we were there, as Andrea said, we were there for people. We had such a high tolerance. People were coming to us and dumping all their problems and everything on us. However, there was nobody for HR. Who do we go to and say, okay, this is what we're going through because you're coming to us. We still had to have this face in front of them that, yes, we will, we'll handle it and that we are good, because we cannot show our stress and what we are feeling, because that would kind of mean like, oh, you know what, they erode their trust in us, or the HR can't handle it. So that was a huge thing that I think that happened. So one thing that I would like to say is for HR professionals is that you need to take care of the other people, but you need to take care of yourselves. And also you have to advocate for yourself, because nobody else will advocate for you because they think you can handle it. So you have to be your own advocates for that. One thing that I noticed once we came back from COVID is that in the employee base for specifically, and everybody that I've talked to, is that because of COVID and all the things that people went through, they have less capacity to handle things now. It just seems like things that never bothered them before COVID, all of a sudden those things just turn into a big thing, which they would just sweep under the rug, like whatever. And, I think that is something that I have seen. And then the work attitude has changed. I mean, we never had this, I never had the option of working from home, always went to the office. But now it's like everybody wants to have some sort of a hybrid work solution and everything. And it's like the unhappiness if you make them come to work for 5 days, or if that's the organization who doesn't believe in that, or they cannot do that. It's just that. And the other thing I want to say is that in a lot of organizations, we have this perfectionist culture where we have to do everything and it has to be perfect. And I think we have to give ourselves grace for mistakes, because stress does that to us, like how Debbie said. So I think those are the things that I think stress brings on, and those are the changes that I've seen.
Thank you all, and welcome back, Sandy. I just want to make sure that, was there anything else that you wanted to add before the gift of real life in real time came into this panel?
No, I think the other ladies have pretty much covered the other areas that I wanted to mention. But thank you for checking.
I just checked the title of the panel, and I hope that you will indulge one more probably clarifying question. But when you hear demanding roles, what comes to mind? And I will ask Andrea to be the pioneer on this one, and then we build it from there.
Sure. So demanding role, honestly, I think it's subjective. I think everyone probably feels like their role is demanding because we're all out here trying to do our best. And if you're trying to do your best, then there are demands made upon your time. Now, as HR professionals, we objectively know some roles are probably more demanding, being leadership, high visibility, things that, go to the public or to your customers, where there's real tangible impact that can be drawn back to you individually, or a team leader responsible for people. And I would say HR is probably one of the most demanding roles, in my opinion. And so everyone is going to think their role is demanding, though. I think that is important. But, there are some more than others.
I will add to that. It says, what do you think is demanding? And I agree with Andrea said, but also, what is the workload? What is the workload that you have in your role? If you have a very heavy workload, it's going to be demanding for you. Secondly, what are the demands of your role, right? Like in HR, like she said, it's a very high stress role. Other roles can be a high stress too, especially if you manage a big department or if you're in a leadership position. It seems like if you're in a leadership position in an organization, a lot of times you just cannot, if you're the one making decisions, you just cannot break off for more than X number of hours or X number of days, because that doesn't happen. And thirdly, I think, is the interpersonal demands that we have in the job, in the role that you're in, meaning your staff, your managers, your leadership, your vendors, like who are you dealing with and all of that stuff. So I think that those are the things I feel like that affect our stress.
Sandy, I saw you unmuted.
So I would say, regarding the demanding roles, what it means, or what it could be considered, is, are they ready for that role? Because it might be something that a role might be as simple as a lead role, but they haven't been given the capacity, or they don't have the capacity, and they haven't been given the training to be able to really be in a lead role. So guess what? Now that role, to me, it becomes a demanding role because of the fact that they were not quite prepared for it. And I agree with, Andrea and Salja, what they said regarding, every role is demanding to a degree. And everybody will see their role as a demanding role. But I think the added factor would definitely be, are they equipped to handle the role?
Debbie, in the hot seat of going last on this one.
I know. And I was like, I don't know what else I could really add to the brilliance that's already been shared. I love the self-reflection piece of saying, like, right, how you see your role as a part of it. And then I also think that, so I would just want to echo two things. One, I think people leadership, there's so much data out there, right? Like people leaders are burnt out. We know the impact that leadership has on well-being, on stress, et cetera. And right, they're not having enough space to sort of take care of themselves. So my heart goes out to everyone who's leading people now. It's like the first time for me, and 25 years I'm not. So I'm enjoying my break, but I remember that is a stress. And I think post, COVID and post COVID, just the demands that are placed on leadership, people leadership is greater than ever. So that's one piece I'd put there. And then the other piece I think is, is there's going to be the timing and the rhythm of roles, right? So I used to work very closely with finance organization, and I supported them for 4 years as their HR sort of business partner. And right, there's certain times where doing the year-end close, particular roles, the month-end close, right? That's always more demanding. And when leadership just wants to know every minute, like what is going on. So I feel like, right, there are those functions that have a rhythm that also goes. So maybe certain times of the year or certain times of the month is not as demanding. And then just the way the business is going. And what I'm hearing more and more from my clients is we used to have a downtime. There used to be a season or a few weeks where you could exhale. And people are like, the pace of business is such that we have lost our downtime, which I think just it just compounds the stress that was there.
I have heard that too. And I think that's very real. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because we used to have, even as HR professionals, I remember there used to be periods of time where you're like, oh, we could think about our training program for next year or what we need to deliver here. And I haven't felt that since COVID personally. It's all the downtime went away. And to Sejal's point earlier about employees not being able to handle as much, I've also seen that. And I think our collective resilience has taken a huge hit. And the good news is we can rebuild resiliency tools. It is a skill, but it takes effort like everything else, and finding those things that actually help, which brings us back to stress management. And I think that resiliency building piece is just cannot be overstated how desperately in need I think everyone is, and how it changes over time. So you can't set it and forget it.
I'm super happy to feel that the energy naturally flows towards discussing techniques and tools. But before we jump into that, what you just shared in this last round inspired a question. What are some of the biggest, but at the same time most insidious focus and energy drainers in the workplace? And I am particularly interested, anything comes to mind that is maybe outside the circle of the usual suspects, something that is maybe an underground root cause, and just things pop up from there. Anything that comes to mind? And I would like to open this question to the audience as well. I'm super interested to hear comments from the audience.
Can I ask a clarifying question then, Manila? Are you saying like other than the usual suspects? Because I always, again, talking with my clients, it's like we're in meetings all the time. So I would just say, right, like effectiveness of meetings, the necessity of meetings, this is a sense of like, well, we need to include, how do we, we're over including, we're not being effective. I feel like, so I'm just going to put that out there. And I think the other one might be just that boundary management that was sort of, we lost it in 2020, like very clearly when people said, oh, this is the greatest work from home experience. And I was like, this is not the greatest work from home experiment. This is we're living where we work, because we were working all the time. And I felt like 2021, people were starting to think about boundaries, 22 boundaries. And now with, hybrid RTO, return to office, right? There's this question of where are boundaries? And so I think that is a big energy drainer, because people feel like they've tried and they were successful and now they're sort of being run over. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big energy drainer.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarifying question, Debbie, because what I had in mind under usual suspects, we talked about workload, we talked about COVID. But for example, what I do find almost on an everyday basis when going about doing the change work, one is that we don't necessarily intentionally stop and delineate between crisis management and change management. And second, probably prompted or highlighted by COVID, so many people changed their expectations and their commitment from work and from their job. And a lot of stress comes from not clarifying the new psychological and social contract with your job. So these were some of the things that I had in mind. Sajal, I see you wanting to contribute.
Yes. So I was going to say one of the biggest things that is people who are negative. And that's the biggest thing in how to deal with them, because some people are just, no matter what you do, there is nothing right that you can ever do, right? We have those people in every organization. And just the criticism and cynicism, I feel like, has gone up a lot. Other than that, I think that another biggest stressor in the workplace is also, which when managers don't know how to manage the workforce that we have today, which means, like, even in my organization now, we have mostly, 75% of is millennials and Gen Z. Which before COVID was a very different workforce. And when you're a manager and you have 5 different generations under you working, you need to know how to work with them and you need to know how to handle them. And that is one big thing that, as HR professionals, that is one, I feel like that we have that training and that coaching and that counseling aspect that we have with our managers and how to manage that workplace and navigate those expectations and challenges that come with being a manager, and then also comes with being an employee, a direct report of that manager. Expectations on both sides, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent points all around so far. I agree with everything. And I think what I would add would be psychological safety, which I think is just the underpinning of people feeling comfortable, safe, and able to participate and feel like they belong there. But even more so, or equally so, I would say decision-making power, like the ability to be autonomous. And how are your leaders empowering people below them throughout your organization to feel like they have a say, a voice, that they can make a decision? I've seen this create so many holes, gaps, people being like, oh, not my decision. And then business just doesn't happen. Creativity goes to the wayside because no one feels empowered to have a voice. And so I think that is a major stressor, because if you don't feel empowered, like you can make a decision, have an opinion, and you don't feel like that's not going to come back to bite you later, then you're going to live in stress and you're not going to be happy or contribute. And it's going to really take down, your culture. So autonomy, decision-making, and psychological safety, I would say, are the ones I would offer.
I really see some wonderful additions in the comments, and I would just like to acknowledge them with a quick read through. I love this cynicism, toxic leadership and management, undisclosed mergers and business sales, change of leadership, micromanagement and lack of trust. This is one that I was very surprised to see, but it makes so much sense. Misuse of data to drive agendas. Negativity got one more supporting vote, and poorly, I guess, trained management. Just people that do not have the tools to recognize, acknowledge, and address the seeds of cynicism and disengagement coming from direct reports, and probably not having the tools to filter their own cynicism and disengagement that will then spill into their teams as well. Yeah, disparity between written and unspoken expectations. And I think this is such a great point in our conversation, to be just as we are nearing the middle of our time together, quite frustratingly so. Now, let's move into the tools, because I felt everybody starting to give us a sneak peek into their own tips and and tips and tricks and best practices. I apologize. I must be running out of English. It's Friday after all. So if we could take just a round on the screen, what are some of the best tips and tricks that have been working for you? And if you can also illustrate that maybe with a story so that we have a little bit of context. I do remember that that's how we set this conversation at the beginning, that it's deeply individual and it's deeply context specific. Sandy, would you mind leading us into this one?
No problem. So, when prior to me, the current role that I'm in is actually on site all the time, right? And so today, because of childcare situation, I am going in a little bit later. So I do get to be home. My prior role, I was always home. And so one big one that would make it easy for me, because when you're working from home and you're, it's, and you have your kiddo here as well, or, distractions or just other things that are preoccupying you as well. It can get to be a little much, right? And so I would always try to stay glued to my laptop. And one of the big things is that sometimes I wouldn't realize it, but my kiddo would realize, like, hey, you haven't taken a break. He would come to me and be like, dance. It's time to get up and dance. We would just do little silly wiggles. And then I kid you not, it would actually, you're stepping away, even if it's for like a whole 60 seconds that you're, doing this whole little silly wiggle dance. And it just kind of like, so I would say definitely that's one that I've taken with me. Even when I am in the office, I kid you not, I will close my door and then I'll just do a little wiggle. All right. Okay. I'm good. And that's one big one for me. Another one that has been working for me would definitely say blocking off time to just simply stepping away, to just simply closing my door. And you know what? Even if it's like just getting on my phone and like checking LinkedIn, okay, it's a distraction. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay, I'm good. I can get back to it if I'm not able to step away from the office completely. And I can honestly tell you one other big one, and especially my boss has noticed this from me, that I started doing, is saying, this is the time I'm going home today, and sticking to it regardless if the building's on fire. I had actually set up like a movie night with my husband, and it was, normally we don't leave the office by 5 like we should, right? I mean, we're HR, who leaves the office at 5. So I actually told her, it's 4:30. You know what? I have a movie at 5:30 and I want to get to it. So I am actually stepping away at 4:30 today. Have a good night. And I will see you tomorrow. And next morning, she's like, you know what? I am actually so glad that you are taking the time to just say, I'm done. That's it. I'm heading out. And it is what it is. So I would say just really having those strict boundaries for yourself, even if it's just going to go watch a movie, going to any distraction that's going to help you kind of re-energize. I would definitely say, just block off the time, set your boundaries, and do your little wiggle dance.
I loved all those tips, but I do have a feeling that the wiggle will be people's choice from this round. Thank you. Who would like to wiggle the unmute button? Sajal.
I'll go next. Yes. So what I realized was, one big thing was, I never took a lunch. I would just warm up my food and sit at my desk and eat in my office. And next 3 hours, the food is still going to be on my desk, because I take one bite, then I get busy, and then I forget about it. So now, and then my team comes to me and says, you still haven't eaten, you still haven't eaten. So what I'm deciding now is, what I've started now is like, you know what, even if it's for 15 minutes, just close my door, put some music on, and just take a couple of bites, whatever, and just kind of just relax, and then you can go back to it. So I started doing that. The other thing that I do with my team is they're in their own offices, and I'll just get up and just go and say, and just do like a silly thing and like a silly joke or something, and just crack up something silly, and we all start laughing, because that's like a good break, in the middle of the day. I'll ask them a stupid question, and then we'll just go into this 5-minute banter back and forth, about that silly little thing, whatever we were talking about today, and that just just give you this positive energy and a burst of laugh, and kind of like doing that. And the third thing was stretching, just getting up and just stretching and say, hey, you know what, let's just stretch. We've been sitting, for an hour now at a desk, and just like get up and stretch. And I think that has also done that. And then I agree with Sandy. You have to create habits and practices if you want to promote you're stress-free for yourself. So I think for that, either you go to the gym, or you wake up in the morning, or you just do something for yourself, whatever it is, for 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever it is, so that you can rejuvenate and energize, whether it's watching something on Netflix, or whether it's like, cooking something for yourself, or whether just taking a bubble bath, whatever it is. But do something that you could do in a routine once or twice a week, or 3 times a week, whatever it is, but just something that can just relax you and take you away into your nice little place that you can be happy for a little bit.
I love all of these. And what is striking me the most is that these are very basic human things that we're doing, right? And I think that's really good to call out and remember that basic self-care tools are tried and true for a reason. Taking a break, giving your brain a minute to walk away and regroup, and feeding your body and shaking out your nervous system. Like, those are all such wonderful tools, just as a human in a body, to help you get through the day. Some other ones that I would recommend that at least work for me, the beauty break is something I love doing. So, that feeling when you're on vacation and you're like, I could live here forever. This is like the best day ever. So you just want to like take that moment, put it in your little heart pocket, take a picture, whatever. And then on these stressful days, in your 5 minutes you're giving yourself, just open it, take a deep breath or two for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and just like soak that feeling back in. And it really, at least for me, really kind of levels me out. I also love an in the zone or office hours. So if you have constant interruptions, as HR professionals, we do, because we're so helpful. We never want to tell anyone no. But if you set up a structure that I am available for questions between this time and this time, or if that's too much, just putting a sign on your door, on your instant chat, wherever, I'm in the zone, come back in 30 minutes, or here's where I can meet you. Like, I'm unavailable this amount of time, but please come back here. It just gives people a guidepost, because they're not trying to interrupt you. And so you have to kind of put that structure that works for you. Those are just some examples, but whatever works in your environment, to give yourself, like, blocking the time, right? To give yourself time to do the work from all the 800 meetings you're in, and to have those interruptions maybe a little bit more pushed together versus sprinkled absolutely throughout your day, where you're context switching and trying to help, and then forgetting what you were doing originally. And that's really stressful and hard for your brain. So setting up some guidelines, giving yourself space, and doing basic self-care things that are not too much. They are necessary, especially as we take on so many emotions and dynamics from other people. If you're not in good working order, you cannot possibly be your best self for your team or yourself or your family when you get home.
I've done it again, Manolo. I've ended up at that last spot. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I'm loving this list. And I think, Andrew, with your thought of like your beauty spot, like, I was going to share this piece about gratitude, which I think is really what you're getting at. And I go back to where I started about the cortisol and like what's appropriate stress, and then too much stress. And like, the science is real on gratitude, right? So if we are about to be in a very, very challenging situation, which, let's face it, when in HR, a lot of our conversations are very challenging. If you're doing that, or also it works if, let's say for me, who I'm working from home now, and I need to actually sort of switch my brain from work mode to family mode, taking that moment of gratitude actually wipes the cortisol out. But you have to sort of anchor yourself. It's not that pithy sign of gratitude. It's being back in that memory of gratitude and holding on to it. And it wipes the cortisol out where it normally would take 3 to 4 hours. So our brains are wonderful things if we know how to use some of those hacks. So I would add that one. And then I'm sure most people on the online, our participants, our panelists, have seen that study from Microsoft about the meetings and what happens with your brain after 1 meeting, and then 2 meetings, and then 3 meetings, and then 4 if we don't have breaks. And so what I would challenge us is say, how and where could we, instead of doing all these 30-minute meetings, where could we do 25? Where could we actually say 45 minutes or 50 instead of an hour? And how do we use that time to reset? And so if you don't even have the 5 minutes for a break to do something with your body, 1 minute of breathing can make all the difference. So there are some techniques out there. I'm not going to list them all because we can Google them. But there are short things that we can do that allows our body to sort of exhale and to be present and to remove some of that extra stress so that we can focus on what's next. So if I think about the crisis of too many meetings, where can we make some small micro adjustments that allow us to get our breath back in and our body back in and our brain back in?
I was sitting here and listening, and I got curious about something. Are there any early warning signs of stress? And can we catch them early on? And I just want to make sure, Debbie, that you don't go last. So I will ask you to lead us into this. And then Sajal, I saw you unmuted. So we go Debbie and Sajal on this one.
So early warning signs, I love that question. And I go back to our bodies, because our bodies are actually the best early warning systems that we have. And so everybody's triggers are going to be different. But one thing I'd ask folks that are joining us today is to reflect even on the past week about, were there situations where you showed up the way you didn't want to, or you felt a loss of control, or maybe you weren't as creative, or things just didn't work, and say, okay, those were moments of high stress. And then start to look for patterns. So for me, my heart rate tends to speed up. I get a scratchy throat, actually. So I start paying attention to my scratchy throat. Sometimes for people, it's breathing, they stop doing deep breathing and they do more shallow breathing. So whatever your signals are, some people clench their fists. So pay attention to your body. It is the best early warning system I think we have to then use some of these techniques that everybody's shared.
Thank you. Sajal.
I was actually going to add to what Debbie said in her last comment, not this one, was about meetings. Just a little tweak in your meeting times that you had, because I know when we were having all these Zoom meetings and an hour meetings and running from one meeting to another meeting, you didn't even have time to get up and just go to have a glass of water or go to the bathroom or anything. So doing a 50-minute meeting or a 45-minute meeting and giving you that 10-15 minute of leeway in between the other meeting, that helps a lot in the stress factor, I feel. And if anybody has to add anything, they can always send you an email later on. But I think that just giving you that break and the buffer in between, it helps you get in your zone and just take a break before the next one. And then the other thing is, Debbie gets a tingle in her throat and I get a cold. And when we were under so much stress during COVID, I was just getting sick like every second week, third week, and it's not COVID. And I know I'm just getting a cold. Even my boss once says, you're getting sick a lot. And I realized at that point that when I'm under a lot of stress, I just get a cold, and I realized that. So, and also I feel like, and I tell that to people, sometimes if you are handling too many things, you start forgetting things because you have, your brain is just seems like it's on overload and it just cannot handle everything that you are feeding it. And that's one of the signs. If you feel like you're forgetting things, I can tell you it's one of the signs that you are stressed out.
I would agree with that. Aside from the very more noticeable ones like irritation, and all of those, getting definitely sick, the headaches. I tend to be one that once I'm like really just overwhelmed, then the headaches come into place. And so where, potentially if I leave it long enough, they can turn into migraine. So I try to, as soon as I start feeling that headache, I'm like, okay, step back time. On here, they were saying, back pains. So it's just everybody's body is different. So us listening to our body, whether it's the headaches, the throat, like Debbie was saying, or Sajal saying that she gets colds, I think it's just listening to where it's triggering you. And some people break up in hives. Some people, it's the heart palpitations, right? And so I think it's just, those are like very early signs, as well as the forgetting things. It's definitely early signs of just, that you're getting to that point where you need to take a break.
Yeah, so I agree. Your body is a great indicator, and it takes, noticing those patterns, like you're all saying. Something different I might offer is a shift in your coping mechanisms. So I saw this a lot during the last few years, but when you're in a good place and a appropriate stress level place, maybe you are going for that walk or shutting your door to have lunch, or you are doing those even small but very basic things that keep you level. But as your stress goes up, you might consciously or unconsciously switch to less healthy coping mechanisms. So maybe instead of having a snack that makes you feel better, you eat the whole bag of chips. Guilty. Maybe instead of going for the walk, you add to cart, add to cart, add to cart. Maybe you pick up the cigarettes you quit. Maybe you're isolating yourself. So it's just these things that take you away from being the most healthy, proactive version of taking care of yourself, are sometimes subtle, because maybe you like add to cart and you added to cart last week, but you didn't add 25 things because now it's escapism and you're trying to, lower your stress levels. So if you feel yourself slipping back into some old, not as good habits, to me, that's always an early warning sign that I'm starting to wobble. And maybe you need to really focus on some of those healthier coping mechanisms, which again will change over time. But if you're less able to go with the flow and you are feeling more annoyed, you are snapping a little bit more than usual, or you're reading into things, those shifts are subtle but definite indicators that you need to kind of regroup yourself, so you don't slip further and further into that stress state.
What I'm getting from listening to all of you, it's absolutely clear that each and every one of you have been on a journey of learning about yourselves, learning about your connections and your interactions and your environments. So I guess the most natural question would be, what is the most important thing that you learned on this journey? But I will put my own personal favorite spin to this question. What is the most meaningful thing that you had to unlearn as you were on this journey? And I will give you a few seconds to think about the answer and just trying to anticipate this question, as we are about 12 minutes from saying goodbye, that this conversation is being recorded and you can always go back and re-listen or recommend it from either from our LinkedIn space or from LinkedIn, from hackinghrlab.io, our platform. So the biggest unlearning when it comes to stress management.
I'll go first.
Oh, go ahead.
Saying yes to everything. Stop it. Stop saying yes to everything. If we don't have the bandwidth, stop saying yes.
Sajal.
I was going to say, ask for support if you need it. Don't be a ninja and say, I'm going to do everything myself. You have a support structure, just like you have a family, you have a support structure, just like at work, you have a support structure. Utilize that, create that, and utilize that. And the other thing is I'm going to say is learn how to delegate. Be okay with delegating. I think those are the things that I would say.
Thank you. Debbie, you're competing for going last again. Oh, okay. Debbie.
I too had to stop saying I needed to do it all. I think it's also had to unlearn that perfect wasn't needed. So it was sort of, when is good enough? And so if I could do that earlier in my journey, that would have saved a lot of stress.
There's this wonderful quote from Brené Brown that I'm a recovering perfectionist and an aspiring good enoughist. Andrea.
I love that so much. And somebody in the comments said people pleasing, which recovering people pleaser here for sure. But the other thing I would add is that rest is productive. Like, you don't have to earn rest. You don't have to work hard enough so that you can then treat yourself to rest. It is actually very necessary. And resting from one chore or email while you're doing another thing, like, is not rest, right? Like, we require rest. It is by itself productive because it clears your space, it regrounds and regroups you, and you don't have to earn it. And that, coupled with the people pleasing, was a hard learning, but it is very, very important. So rest is productive. You don't have to earn it. You deserve it just by being a human.
Well, we are 10 minutes away from saying goodbye, and I would like to keep myself honest to a promise I made to myself not too long ago, that I will always try to bring in the dimension of what does it mean to be an HR function of one. I do believe that there are many people in our audience who live in that reality. So my next question to all of you would be, out of everything that we touched on, what would you highlight? And also, what would you add as a specific technique that might be particularly meaningful and helpful to those people who are an HR function of one?
I'll take a first go. I think as an HR practitioner of one, setting those boundaries is absolutely paramount. You cannot do everything. So what is the most important? And then it's this has worked for me, at least, with your leadership team. As more and more things come on the list, that's wonderful. Love to get to that. What would you like to move down the list? And by being just very straightforward, like, that sounds amazing. So what are we not doing then to accomplish that? It's hard at first, but it's realistic. And then you're not over-promising. So, you just have to keep your bandwidth in mind and make sure that what you're doing are the right things for the business, but that you're constantly in a state of negotiation, because so is everyone else. So don't shortchange yourself and think you have to do it all. And the other just tiny quick thing I would say, communities like this one, incredible mentorship, cannot be overstated. The value of having someone that you can talk to, especially if you don't have teammates internally. You've got to find someone that you can talk to, vent to, brainstorm with.
Thank you, Andrea. Debbie.
I love that. I love just the power of community and the relentless prioritization. The thing I was going to add is role modeling how you do your work. So knowing you only have so much bandwidth. So are we going to role model stress management? Are we going to role model emotional intelligence? Are we going to role model taking care? Because then it's that we're being true to our word. And we're also respecting our word. So I think, just recognize the power that you have in how you do your work.
Sandy.
So Andrea did take part of what I wanted to say, and that was, finding an outside source. But I would say I would take it a little bit of a step further. Yes, it's nice to have others that are in HR because they understand what you're going through, your point pains, and all of that stuff. But I think we need to take it a step further and actually find someone that isn't going to be able to talk about work. What are we trying to do? We're trying to step away from that to help us kind of, unwind, relax, and all of that. So I would say finding a group that where you can still learn, but it's not HR related. Let's say it's, maybe it could be, I don't know, like maybe perhaps a broker or benefits, someone that you have actually have stuff in common that's perhaps HR related, but that it's still separated enough to where you're able to just step away and be able to just kind of unwind and vent and not really think about work, I think would actually help you to kind of regroup and focus.
Thank you. Sajal.
I was going to say HR is actually one function that is a very lonely function, especially if you are a department of one, which I hope nobody is, and somebody can find another person and and have at least two people HR department, because HR is truly lonely at the top, because you don't know who you can talk to and what you can say and what you cannot say, and anything you say can be construed in a very different way. So you're always very careful to say things, especially in the organization, if that's what's going on. So you are a lonely person. So you have to find in that organization, you have to find your champions. You have to find your tribe that can be with you and understand you and be that. But other than that, also, when I was with corporate, multinational organizations, you have corporate HR, so you have support from corporate HR. But now, if you're in a smaller organization, you don't have that corporate HR support. So you're like the it in the HR thing. So you have to think about everything yourself. Like it feels like we were in grad school back again, because research and creating everything yourself and from scratch and everything, that's how that feels. So I feel like that if you're in a niche industry or any other industry that you're in, if you can create a cohort of the people that are within your sister organizations and can be there and talk to them and kind of share what you have and the challenges you have and anything that you have, I think that can relieve a lot of stress. If you're updating your handbook, hey, I just updated my handbook, let me share mine, what do you have in yours, let's take a look at it. So just having that, I feel like support can relieve a lot of stress, and you can talk through things, which can help a lot.
So we are about 3 minutes away from wrapping this one up, and I was wondering, can each of you share one critical skill that underpins stress management? And what I would ask you to do, just keep it really short. So the skill and maybe a clarifying sentence or an actionable sentence. And in the interest of time, I will push the e-mic around. So I will ask Debbie to lead us into this.
All right. I was going to say emotional intelligence, starting with self-awareness, understanding your triggers, your body self-awareness, and moving from there.
Thank you so very much. Sandy.
I will kind of echo Debbie's, and but I will take it to be kind to yourself, be nice. Your heart and your head can hear everything you're saying to yourself. So be kind.
Thank you. Andrea.
Yeah, mine's not that different. I would say self-respect. And just a very easy way to do that is when you're about to make a decision, say, does this respect myself and where I want to go and who I am? And that can be a nice guiding light for you.
Thank you so very much. And Sajal.
I would add to that same thing and say, know your triggers, because when you're not in the workspace, people can push your buttons and you can say things, but you're not in the workspace. But when in the workspace, when people push your buttons, you still have to be very professional. You have to know how to handle it. So you really have to know yourself and know how to put that face up and how to handle all of that.
Well, I do believe that this panel is the absolute champion on self-discipline and self-pacing and actually taking the facilitation request almost literally. Now, I do want to take one more minute out of the two that we have left and ask the absolute last question of today, I promise. How does stress management done meaningfully and mindfully and effectively feel like to you in one word? I will give you a few seconds. In the meantime, I will just wholeheartedly thank everyone in the audience who took the time and the bandwidth to be here with us today. And I will thank Jessa for taking care of us yet again. And well done, stress management. How does it feel like? And let's do this popcorn style for one last time.
Present.
Thank you.
Freedom. I feel like it feels like freedom.
Freedom. So we have present, we have freedom. What will we have from Sandy or Sajal? Sajal.
I think we have to be proactive in preventing stress for ourselves. But when we know we're under stress, then we know we have to be reactive and know how to react to it.
Thank you. Sandy.
Simply be you.
Thank you so very much. Sajal, Andrea, Sandy, and Debbie, thank you. It was a joy, it was a privilege, and it was definitely a gift on this day. Thank you very much, and I hope I will get to welcome as many of you panelists and audience very, very soon on the other side of, I hope, a lovely weekend. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.